Ratings are pretty high for a Scream. What does Scream do right that Halloween does wrong?
Um, well, the first thing that Scream does very well is it is self-aware and meta and plays with the genre. And I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, the originals are the best, they're sacred because they create the template. No, like you even asked me one time what my favorite zombie movies were, and none of them were the classics because the ones that I like are the ones who take what the classics did and build on them. And that's what
Mm,
Scream does. And it is weird because the same couple of characters just have plot armor and pop up in the movies over and over, and somehow the movies keep coming out good. Now, Wes Craven has passed. This will be the first movie without him, so maybe they'll lose that direction that made them work.
mhm.
But part three is probably the worst, and it's still perfectly fine. Scream 1 was great. Scream 2 was so good it was overplayed. And Scream 4 was also really good. I was shocked by how good it was. But Wes
It's
Craven is just, I just want to take a minute to acknowledge how astonishing he was. Like,
mm,
I can't think of any other director who did for any genre what he did for horror. Because in the 70s, he drops The Hills Have Eyes, which was, it basically created like the hillbillies are out to get you subgenre of horror. It was prolific and it changed horror. It was groundbreaking. He also released, Last House on the Left in the same time, which was a groundbreaking exploitation horror. And then he comes out in the 80s and makes Nightmare on Elm Street, another timeless classic that was massive. If it weren't for that movie, we wouldn't have had New Line Cinema. That film did gangbusters, launched a whole franchise. And
right.
then he comes out in the 90s with Scream. And it's just like this man launched like horror icons across three different decades and never lost his edge. You know? Like, no one else has ever really done that. Like Steven Spielberg, he made some cool action adventure movies and cool horror movies, if you want to count Jaws as horror movies. But he couldn't keep bumping those out over the years. He softened and switched to genre. Same with Ridley Scott. He made Aliens and he made Gladiator, but now he's churning out bad films and he never like was able to keep the mastery of his craft up. But Wes Craven, for he may have a few duds under his belt, but he did for horror what very few people could do for any genre.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I mean, and I think there is going to be a lot of people that hate on this new Scream because he's not involved, and that will be the only reason that they hate on it, no matter how good it is, which is unfortunate. Um, but yeah, I mean, but again, this is just a basic slasher film, and I'm like, what makes this better than Jason, Michael Myers, like all those other ones? Because like to me, it's just silly, and you don't have those rated nearly as high as these. Is it just the filmmaking behind it, or is it like the actual like slasher himself?
I mean, it's everything. It is the filmmaking, it's the dialogue, it's how clever the films are. If you look back at like Halloween, I just rewatched it. It's very competently done, it's well done, but the kills aren't that great. And then if you look at Friday the 13th, it's not as it's well made and everything, don't get me wrong, but it's not as competently shot as Halloween. It doesn't have as much dread and suspense built into it, but the kills are much better. And
Yeah.
it's just, but both of them are products of their time. I don't think either are really timeless films. I just enjoy them because I kind of have nostalgia for them.
Right.
And Scream, I do feel like it is timeless. Like if you watch horror movies, even some of the modern jump scary supernatural horror films that are coming out, which are really just ripoffs of 70s films, Actually, because they are just rip-offs of templates from horror movies made in the 70s. If you watch those types of movies and then you go back and watch Scream, where it's a meta commentary, it's going to be commenting not only on the films that came before it, but films that come after it.
Well,
It's Wes Craven made the new Nightmare, and I love that movie. It's probably my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and I plan on rewatching the whole franchise, so that might change with like my current sensibilities. But it was kind of like a practice run for what he wanted to do with Scream, the
yeah,
whole meta narrative, and I feel like Cabin in the Woods is probably the one that's done it the best of creating a meta narrative that kind of comments on the horror genre while staying true to the horror genre.